this is something really, truly fascinating, and I've been wanting to kind of ask you a little bit more about how you got the idea to actually make this kind of spar-based pod, this residence, if you will, that literally comes out of the water for those people that might not know what that means. Where did you get the idea for this, and sort of why did you think this would be something that could actually be viable, that we could actually do right now?
Well, the thing with the boat is you can live in a boat, no problem. And in theory, you can live in a boat in the middle of the ocean, also no problem. But the thing is that the boat gets tossed around in the waves. So what we are looking for is something, a shape that well, you still feel a little bit of the wave motion, but it's more like a gentle movement, not getting tossed around in your bed.
Yeah, I imagine that's not something people would want to feel in their home. I know I wouldn't. I get especially seasick. But it is really interesting. So little birdie told me that initially your background was in a different field entirely, more of in the aerospace realm. I hear this was kind of more of like a means to an end than something that you wanted to create for the sake of. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, aerospace is not that different actually. I mean, maybe from the outside it sounds different, but engineering is very similar. I mean, anything like mechanical engineering is, electrical engineering is another animal, but anything that is mechanical engineering is very, very similar. So things like stresses and elongations or something like this don't change just because you're moving from an aircraft to a ship.
Right. So you saw the kind of the similarities, and your background is in aerospace, correct?
That's what I studied.
Gotcha. And so you were able to take some of those kind of synergies between the two realms and use that for this idea. So backing up a little bit, actually, we were just talking earlier about, people ask you all the time, is this viable? How can we do this? Can you really live in a pod, this spar-based pod that comes out of the ocean floor? What do you tell people? Is this something that really is truly viable? Is this something that we can do right now?
What we are doing is this floating platform, so they don't come out of the ocean floor. They float in the same way as an oil rig is doing. That's also where this comes from. The guys with the oil rigs were there first, like 40 years ago. And the idea of such a platform, like a spar, is also to have a platform that is relatively stable in the open ocean.
So what you're saying is this is not really a new concept?
It's pretty old. How old? I don't know. How long you have to go back in history. I always find that you have to go back in history much longer than you think to find the actual origin of something. Like flying machines, yeah, okay, you can say the Wright brothers or Lilienthal, but the ideas and pretty viable concepts went back go back much longer than that.
And they were building upon all those engineering feats before them.
Oh yeah, I mean, people are building other flying machines that we might not think about hundreds of years ago, like the Mongol brothers in France. They built the first hot air balloon.
Oh, right.
But before that, I think people already built some other kind of balloons with gases.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So, so back to the viability thing. Obviously, so there's now the ability to float. Oil rigs have been using that, so that was what this was based on. What about the water and getting enough water and storing the wastewater? How is this something that we're now able to do relatively cost efficiently that we weren't able to do before? Or why hasn't anyone done this before?
People do that actually. I mean, obviously this machinery that came in use in large-scale installations, like in a cruise ship or something like this, or in a warship. Centuries ago, they started distilling salt water to get fresh water, to get drinking water. I think one of the first such machines was on Nelson's flagship, the HMS Victory. Now we have water makers that work with pressure and squeezing water through a membrane, and the salt stays back. And that is a very simple machine. You have a pump and you have a cylinder that has a membrane. That's
great. So what you're saying is it's a fairly simple technology, fairly accessible.
They get cheaper by the year. Yeah. So that means for a home, you couldn't afford that if you have a water distiller or something like this. This is a tedious machine that costs a lot of money to make. Right. And now this is a very sturdy machine that works without attending to it like for decades.
There was a prototype that was built in Thailand. I was just wondering if you can kind of tell me some of the lessons that you learned from that whole experience in building that first prototype. That might be a long answer, but...
What you learn is how not to do certain things. Well, what we want to do is building something as simple as possible. So we are wondering if all of the stuff they are doing on oil platform is actually necessary, or it can be just skipped, or it can be simplified in some ways. And for some things, we learned that you can simplify things, like this helix thing that goes around these spars, or you cannot just skip it. You have to have something for that. I guess we can simplify that one by having simply a growth on the outside of a spar, like corals.
Okay. But basically, so you learned in Thailand you could make things a little bit more simple, I guess, than you maybe thought you had to.
In Thailand, we learned that you need something like this helix, but here we learned we don't need an actual helix. We just use nature to help us.
It's even better. I love that. The other thing I was wondering about, what is this air battery that I'm hearing about? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Oh, it's a storage device. So normally on a seaport like this, we would use a combination of solar panels and maybe wind power and batteries. Okay. So at night you have power from the batteries, and in the daytime you charge them with solar panels, and when the wind blows you charge them with the wind generator. Now, if you need more, if you need a lot of power, there's other ways of doing it. Like you're not using batteries, because batteries are kind of expensive and hard to recycle, and they don't last very long and stuff like that. Yeah. So there's maybe six years, maybe 8 years for a lithium battery. Maybe they get better, I don't know. But now the air battery allows you to store a lot of energy for very low cost. You have to pay a price, and that is efficiency. The efficiency is not as good as a lithium battery or even a lead battery, but a
little more environmentally friendly, easier to...
It doesn't have any toxic ingredients. It's much cheaper per kilowatt hour, a lot cheaper, orders of magnitude actually. Wow. So it's very simple. You have some sort of device underwater, it could be made of concrete, like a box that is open at the bottom. Or it could be a bladder, it's like a hot air balloon. And then you pump air into it. Like if you have a balloon, it inflates. But it inflates under the pressure that is down there. So if that container is, let's say, in 2,000 meter depth, then the pressure inside of the balloon is 200 atmospheres. Wow. And that air compressed to 200 atmospheres, that contains a lot of energy. Yeah.
I bet. I'm not an engineer, so you basically, if you were to go and do more than that, you would totally lose.
I think there's movies on YouTube. What happens if you... there is one movie on YouTube where somebody is shooting a bullet into a dive tank, which incidentally is also 200 atmospheres. Wow. And they put that into a container. The idea, I think, was to recreate a situation of Jaws. You know, where the guy was on the ship, and then the dive tank was in the mouth of the shark, and he was shooting that, and the shark exploded. Wow. But in that experiment, it didn't happen that way. So they had a large caliber rifle and shot a hole into the dive tank, and then it was going in the container, like a shipping container, to protect everybody from the effects. It was going in there like a rocket.
That's crazy. So I think the technology behind the air battery is really exciting, I think, because to be able to harness that kind of energy relatively efficiently, relatively cost effectively, and to be able to have it really not impact the environment at all is something that really we haven't seen a whole lot of before. So I love that idea. I think that's really exciting. But is there anything else that you would want people to know about where this idea was born and why you think that it is something that the world needs?
Well, I guess it goes back to the Sea Study Institute before my involvement, but in my involvement it was really born actually when I met Chad before and Nadia, and then I met Grant, and Grant thought, this is great, we have to market that, and this is something, yeah, I believe the world needs. The thing is, whenever humanity had the opportunity to expand, like maybe after a disaster, like after the Black Death, when there was suddenly empty space available, anytime that happens, then what we see is an increase in liberty and an increase in prosperity. So we don't actually need a disaster to create great prosperity, but in the past it was usually the case, with the exception of like a frontier situation like in America.
Sure, yeah.
So what you had in America was suddenly there was empty space, if you are not considering the natives that were actually there. For the purpose of discussing a frontier, there was empty space, and people got into that space, and out of their home countries, everybody was a serf. At some point, these people got the idea, if that continues, this outflow of people, then we have to work for ourselves, because nobody left. So what happened is they had to relax all these, they scrapped all these rules and regulations and stuff like that historically. And what we've done in history is the rise of the commoner. That didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because the ruling class was forced to let people go, let them pursue their goals. And that is I think, why it is important to open a new frontier.
I love that. That's really cool. Yeah.
So this time without people who are living there already.
Yes, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Rudi. This has been so interesting to find out kind of the backstory about how this idea was born. And I really look forward to seeing all of this stuff actually exist in the world on our oceans soon.
Coming soon. I mean, you see, it's already pretty advanced.
It's pretty cool. I have to admit, this is pretty amazing. I feel like I'm in the future right now.